This is Matt Hillen from the Illinois Department of Commerce. I am your primary contact for the Youth Career Pathways RFA. We're going to go ahead and get started. I just want to kind of lay out what we're going to do. For those of you, if anyone that's on today was on last Wednesday on our initial webinar, I am going to cover some basic information for those who won't. However, I'm going to do that at a little bit higher level. I'm not going to go into as much detail on the RFA and the basics as we did on Wednesday. I'm going to try and go through that a little bit faster so we can get to the frequently asked questions portion, which is where I'd like to spend most of our time having a conversation about what information folks feel is necessary to either make a decision to apply or as technical assistance for your applications. I will go ahead and get started on the slides here in a minute, but I do want to first make sure that everybody sees the questions that are on their screen and answers those questions if they could. It really helps us planning-wise if we know who it is that we're talking to, so please let us know what organization you're from. We also want to know what kind of organizations, we're kind of aggregating what kinds of organizations have been interested in this, so we would like you to answer the type of entity or organization that you represent and what your intentions are so far. We're going to ask you now what your initial thought is on applying for a grant under the RFA, and then we're going to ask you again at the end after what you've heard, if your intention is still the same or if you feel differently. It also helps us to figure out what geography the interest is coming from, which is why we asked you for your economic development region as well. We thank you very much for spending the time with us today to get deeper into what we're doing. It's a very exciting time under the new Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. This RFA is supported by all of our core partners, not just the Department of Commerce, but also the Illinois Department of Employment Security, the Illinois Department of Human Services Division of Rehabilitation Services, and the Illinois Community College Board. These are all the partners that administer the different titles of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. I'll go ahead and get started into the slides. Like I said, I'm going to be going through these a little bit more quickly. Feel free to ask questions as we go. Like I said, there's a large portion at the end of these slides that didn't exist last Wednesday regarding the frequently asked questions that we've received so far. We have tried to address all of those, and I believe that we've addressed almost all of them already online on the FAQ section on the website illinoisworknet.com/youth2016, where we're housing all of our RFA application and supporting materials, in addition to any information related to informational sessions or contact information for folks that you may need to use as resources, primarily me, in the course of your application for a grant. So I'll go ahead and get started. The overall project goal of the RFA is around supporting the new WIOA priorities of partnership and service alignment across all the core partners. The state unified planning has been done for the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. That's a 4-year plan throughout, or that encompasses the services of all 4 core partners. We're now in the phase where folks are looking at regional planning, hence the questions about geography. We want to make sure that those regional plans are being supported and that we're building new partnerships based on innovative programs, and that's really what this RFA is about, is addressing youth through career pathways programs that line up with WIOA and line up with the regional partnerships and what they're trying to accomplish. We do want to go forward with as many new and innovative partnerships as we can. We want to make sure that those partnerships are sustainable and that they have a good deal of business involvement, because at the end of the day, we're trying to get folks jobs, and that requires a commitment from business partners. The basics on funding: typical grants will be 12 to 18 months. The applications are due May 2nd, which is a Monday. Applications received after that date will be reviewed only if funds remain once we've reviewed and awarded the applications that were timely. Grant awards will typically not exceed $500,000. It would have to be a pretty big project to go above that soft cap, but it is not a hard cap. Blending and braiding of funds is required. Again, we want to make sure that services are aligned and we're taking advantage of all the funds and the services that are out there so that we're not duplicating services in a time when budgets are so tight. Projects must have co-investment of public and private funds, and that speaks mainly to the business involvement that we're seeking in these applications. And there is a requirement to report those leveraged resources. Projects should be sector-based, and for those of you who don't know about Illinois Pathways can be viewed at illinoispathways.com, and that'll tell you more about the sectors that we see as being our priority within our the WIOA planning going forward. Sorry, I'm having a little bit of technical difficulty. Chelsea, if you could flip the slide for me. Speaking of eligible applicants, who can apply for the funding? Local workforce innovation areas are primary partners that should be addressed. Whether or not you're from a local workforce innovation area, you should be in contact with your local workforce innovation area in planning for your application. Private sector training providers, private sector employers, employer associations, community-based services, community-based organizations, and other entities that provide WIOA services, and incorporated workforce boards and Title I-B providers may all apply for this as well. As far as participants go, we're looking at youth that are aged 16 to 24. We want to make sure that those youth are eligible for WIOA services. We want to make sure that there's an emphasis in the programs that we award on opportunity youth. And opportunity youth, that's a kind of a term of art right now, and how that's defined is, you know, sometimes you may see it defined as disconnected youth. Those are young people who are not in school and simultaneously not in the workforce. There are also a set of priority populations that we list in the RFA, and you can check out the RFA to see what those are. We have a WIOA spending requirement for youth funding. All state and local youth funds must spend on out-of-school youth at a 75% clip. We intend to fund projects based on that idea. It's not that we will not fund projects for in-school youth. We will fund projects for in-school youth if folks apply with projects that meet that criteria. However, we have to, at the state and local level, spend on out-of-school youth at a 75% clip, and that's going to guide us in how we award projects. Priority populations, as I just mentioned, there are certain priority populations that we want to make sure we're placing emphasis on. If you have an application that addresses one of these populations, you know, we're going to look very closely at funding that project. I want to also make clear at this point that that models that integrate different populations into one program, sometimes known as full inclusion models when we're talking about youth with disabilities specifically, are highly encouraged. And when it comes to the to youth with disabilities, that's something that we are addressing as an employment-first state. Program criteria, we want to make sure that you're looking at the program criteria that was laid out in the Illinois Workforce Investment Board's, or Illinois Workforce Innovation Board, I'm sorry, the state workforce board, who created a youth task force that ran over the course of about the last year and a half. I was staffed to that task force, and the task force identified 10 key program criteria for sustainable best practice career pathway programs. We looked nationally and statewide at different models and came up with a list of criteria that we felt were absolutely the most important in a good career pathway program. There were 10 of them, and those are addressed in the 10 program criteria that you see on this slide. Support for regional and WIOA planning is also a high priority for us. We want to make sure that those regional plans are being supported by innovative projects. We want to make sure that the training credits that folks are training the youth for are both stackable and portable, and we'll get into more of what that means later. We also want to make sure that the projects are developing a clearly articulated plan for continuous improvement and sustainability using a mix of WIOA formula funds, co-investment from business partners, and any other participating regional partners. Innovative approaches and strategies are, there are a few examples listed in the RFA. Business intermediaries popped up in a lot of the best practice program models that we examined on the youth task force, and that's definitely something that we would encourage looking at. We want to make sure that service alignment and linking workforce partners is something that folks are thinking about in their projects. These are not requirements. These are approaches and strategies that are encouraged. Having a hard time flipping the slide here, Chelsea. There we go. Full inclusion models, again, full inclusion models, and I see a disability-related question. Does disability include diagnosed mental health challenges? Absolutely, it does. Mental health is definitely part of the disability criteria. Career pathway programs that fully integrate youth with disabilities into general training classrooms and feature full integration into the general workforce for work-based learning and employment opportunities. That's how we're defining full inclusion models. So full inclusion models are just making sure that we're not separating or siloing individuals with disabilities. As far as reporting goes, grantees will be expected to submit quarterly programmatic reports. When you get into, if you're awarded a grant, you get into grant negotiations, we'll talk more about this. The quarterly programmatic reports are basically kind of a status report on the activities and outcomes that are laid forward or that are laid out in the scope of work for the grant. That includes a quarterly trial balance report that comes from your system, your accounting system, and then has to be matched up with the system, the fiscal system that you report into on our end. There will be obviously a case management piece where WIOA registrant information using the either the IWID system or the Illinois WorkNet system or some other reporting process. Though I can tell you already that 100% of these projects will fit into one of those two systems, either IWIDS or Illinois WorkNet. And there may be a formal evaluation component that we use for your project. If we see that it's something that maybe something that we want to roll out statewide, it may be that we decide we want to do a formal evaluation process and study that program and its implementation so that we can take a look at how scalable and how much of a statewide impact that project could make. MOUs are required. Non-LWIAs must have an MOU with the local workforce innovation area that describes the roles and responsibilities of each party that are necessary to the project. There should also be an MOU that is with the business partners that participate in the project that talks about any leveraged resources and what the employers are providing in terms of work experience, OJT, or hiring. As far as the fiscal piece goes, I don't know if you, Sheila, do you want to jump in here for the next few slides?
Sure.
I'll flip for you.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sheila Sloan. I work with the monitoring and fiscal area. So the first thing you have to understand when it comes to grant costs is they have to be allowable, which means that they are necessary, reasonable, they are allocable to the grant, and it is for grant-based activities that are contained in your scope of work. Some of the different kinds of funding mechanisms that you can use for your grant would be the specific grant funds that we award to you, and as he mentioned earlier, matching funds and also leveraged funds. So then a lot of people are, what is reasonable? A reasonable cost is one that would not exceed what a prudent person under circumstances when a decision made to incur the cost would make. You know, basically, is it a fair market price? Are you acting with prudence? And you know, there's no significant deviation from established prices. You know, say, you know, your brother-in-law has this company and he sells this product, but company B down the street sells it also. You can't just buy it from your brother-in-law. You know, you have to be prudent. You know, depending, you know, and you want to use your cost analysis in the basis of deciding what to purchase and where to purchase it from. And just use really sound business practices when you're determining what costs are reasonable for your grant and to do your activities. The aspects of necessary, do I need this item or service to meet the grant goals? If it's not necessary, then you probably don't want to spend it with the grant funds. You could purchase it with something else. And is this the minimum amount that you need to spend to meet the needs of the grant activities? Because you don't want to like purchase something now and then, oh, I need some more of that. You know, kind of plan out your needs and do a one-time purchase if you can, because sometimes you can get a better price break that way. Reasonable, do you have the capacity to use what you're purchasing? Are you paying a fair rate for that item? And if you were asked to defend that purchase, would you be comfortable defending that? Or another way to look at it is to, would it, you know, if it made the newspaper, would you be okay with that? Matching funds, that's the portion of your project costs that are not paid with federal funds, and they meet the following conditions. Additional non-federal funds that are expended by either yourself or, you know, well, basically yourself to support your grant objectives. They must be spent only on allowable grant activities. You have to verify that we have to be able to verify those in your records. They are not used to support another federal funded program, because you can't match a federal grant with other federal funds. Is it necessary, reasonable, and allowable under the cost principles? And those are at 2 CFR 200. And are they provided for in your approved budget that was provided and approved in your whole grant agreement that you have received? And do they conform to the uniform guidance provision of cost sharing or matching? And that's the specific reference listed there on the slide, the 200.306. For leveraged funds, these are resources that are used by the grantee to support your grant activities and outcomes. and usually they're from a third party. They must be allowable match, or no, sorry, that means both allowable match and other costs that do not rise to the requirements of the regulations, but they support the outcomes of the grant activity.
Christina Hutchison, we are going to address your question in detail when we get to the FAQ section.
Yes, in fact, I think there was a question on that
Yes.
in the FAQ.
So WIOA is a reimbursement-based program, and we'll talk a little bit more about this as well. Funding will be provided on a reimbursement basis, and reimbursements will be prorated based on the grantee meeting established performance factors. When we talk about performance, what does that mean? I pulled out Section 5 of the application so that you can see exactly what we're talking about. You need to indicate the measures of those that are listed that apply. Those that are listed are the ones that are most important to us. However, additional measures for consideration are allowed and can be entered into your application. So if you have a program that's a little bit outside the box for what our system normally does, that doesn't mean that we don't want to fund it. You just need to let us know what some good measures are, and if we see that those measures have great impact, that may be something that is a bonus for your application. When it comes to monitoring, there are two, kind of a before and after on the monitoring. I don't know, Sheila, you may want to talk about this as well.
Okay. All grantees that receive federal funds have to be given a pre-award survey. It's a review conducted by the monitoring team, and we will look at that to make sure that your fiscal systems and all of your operations are can operate within the uniform administrative guidance. Do you have a fund accounting system? Can you easily identify these specific grant activities? Can you separate these grant activities in your system? And I haven't been on one for a while. I know Chuck has been on one, my boss. So I don't know exactly all of the questions, but it's pretty basic questions just about your operations and your fiscal systems and your internal controls. And then once the grant is moving along and there's been some activity in that, then there will be a monitoring team that comes out, and we will look at the operations that have been conducted with the grant itself. We'll look at some fiscal documents, look at some disbursements, we'll look at your internal controls. And on the program side, we will also look at some of the participants and verify that, all of the stuff that you have done with them and that they've met all the requirements for the program. And, you have to allow us to review the records. That is in the uniform guidance and as a part of your federal grant, that you have to allow us or DOL or a monitoring body to review your documents.
We're not going to show up at your door without letting you know. I mean, it's not a surprise thing.
Right, yeah.
We will announce the monitoring to you. And the pre-award survey, again, just to back up what Sheila was saying, a pre-award survey is basically about finding the capacity of folks that we haven't dealt with before. So making sure that folks have the capacity to administer the grants that we give out if you're a grantee that has never worked with us before. Key elements of the application, we want to make sure that you're fulfilling the requirements of the RFA, that the application is complete, that, again, you've demonstrated capacity, and we'll talk about that. And that's something, that's part of that pre-award survey. You've got experience in employer relationships that lend themselves to the goals of this RFA, that you've coordinated with the partner agencies that are a priority, that you've addressed priority populations, the quality and detail of your work plan, and that the budget is reasonable in relationship to the proposed activities and outcomes. We have a duty to make sure that there's a good return on investment with the taxpayer dollars that we spend. When it comes to the budget, make sure that it's clear and concise, that the appropriateness and reasonableness of the budget as Sheila has defined it for you is there. Generally, the maximum grant award will be $500,000 as we talked about. Section 7 we pulled out here just to make sure that you can kind of get a visual on this. make sure that you're using the appropriate line items, and those line items are defined for you in the budget narrative, which is the second half of Section 7. Make sure that you double-check your math. We see a lot of applications come in. I can't remember the last time that we got a big stack of applications for an RFA, and the stack of applications that I was set to review did not have at least one mistake in a budget. Follow the budget narrative instructions so that after you put in those budget line items, that you're explaining what those line items are. You're explaining how they break down, and then double-check your math again. And when I say this, I mean specifically make sure that the budget in your budget narrative matches that in your budget. And this is, again, a place where I see folks make mistakes. Sometimes you're massaging different pieces of your program. You're taking this out, putting this in, and all of a sudden you've got a budget narrative and a budget that doesn't match up. So make sure that you're double-checking your math, both that it's internally, that internally the math works out, and that it works out between your narrative and your actual budget. Be sure to respond to all elements of the RFA. Be clear and concise, and be timely. Again, we will not review applications that come in late until we've already awarded a round of applications. All of the information that you need is online at the Youth 2016 website. That's the RFA materials, any FAQ, including those that we're about to explore, data, and resources for a strong application. We put up the entire Youth Task Force report. It is there to explore in detail, and there are some other data and links that we've gotten requests for that we'll continue to post as we go. I am your key contact. That's my email address. Please reach out to me if you have questions. Let's talk about the FAQ. I'm going to break this down into sections and try and summarize so we're not doing it question by question. But this is kind of a summary of the questions that we've gotten so far, both that I've gotten via email and those that we've gotten through the website FAQ. And again, we're trying to post all of the questions that I get individually on the FAQ as well, but in case any slip through the cracks, I mean, this is kind of a good summary resource for you. Applications, again, are due May 2nd with project start date of July 1, 2016. 12 to 18 months is the targeted project length. And projects longer than 18 months, if you've got this great innovative project that's going to hit all these criteria that we're looking for, and it happens to last 2 years, we're not going to rule it out immediately, but there have to be career pathway outcomes within our targeted time frame, meaning there needs to be permanent unsubsidized placement in there. There has to be or a post-secondary track for the next career credential. So when we talked about stackable, portable credentials, we're talking about credentials that lead to more credentials. To answer Jill's question, the grant is not renewable, so to speak. That's why we included the criteria that we're looking for a sustainability plan, because we want these projects to start being embedded in the regional plans, to be something that is valuable enough to your local workforce area that you are going to be a key partner, the businesses that you're dealing with are going to be key partners, and then through WIOA formula funds that go out to the local areas every year, that's going to be something that these great programs are going to be something that are going to be embedded in the planning and going to be sustainable for years to come. We are not going to be coming back every year and renewing these projects at the state level. We may do another similar application to this. We may do another similar RFA in the future, but it's highly likely that we'll be looking for additional new projects, and that may be, you may want to develop a new project at that point and come back in for it. We certainly are not going to rule out applicants on a continual basis, but it won't be something where we're just saying, oh, this is a great program, we're going to fund it from the state level. That's not really the point of what we're doing. We're trying to support regional plans, and the regional plans are where these successful projects are hopefully going to be housed in the future. I just skipped over that. We got a couple of questions about Whether or not statewide applications are appropriate, we don't feel that they are because we feel like it's too much of a lift. We're asking for you to deal with your local workforce innovation areas. If you're dealing with all of them, it's simply not going to be feasible to administer and to play to the key demographics and the key sectors in every single area in the state. We want you focused on regions and local areas. Regions may be made up of a couple of local areas. It may be something where part of your project is in one and parts in another. That's completely acceptable, but statewide is too much, we feel, for a pilot program. We want these projects to make sure that make sure that they're focused on the key sectors and that that's backed by data. Again, with business engagement and the MOU requirement, we want to make sure that at a minimum, when you come in with your application, because we know that sometimes it takes a little while to get an MOU with a business going, that at a minimum, there's a written statement of intent to develop an MOU prior to the receipt of funds, and those MOUs will be required prior to the receipt of funds. So if you don't have all the signatures on it on May 2nd, do not fail to send in your applications. Just get a statement of intent from the business that you're working with or businesses that they intend to develop an MOU with you around this project. And that's good enough for us for the review process. However, for award of funds, again, before we award funds to you, you have to have that MOU completed. And for those of you who have already dealt with OJT at the local level under WIA or WIOA, you can really kind of base your business MOUs, at least in part, on that. That's a good example of how MOUs can be laid out for work experience or other job seeker programs. High demand, higher skill speaks to the key sectors and the demand sectors that we want to see involved in this program. You need to consult with your local workforce area because, as we said, they're going through a regional planning process in which they are already lining up all the data in your region around what the targeted sectors are going to be for services under WIOA. And to get kind of a taste of that, you can check out Illinois Pathways, as we mentioned before. When it comes to work-based learning for the purposes of the RFA includes on-the-job training. And training and remedial ed can be done alongside that. We just wanted to mention that. Paid work experience, internships, and apprenticeships. There are other things that you want to include that you feel like we're missing in work-based learning. We can certainly talk about that. You can just reach out to me and let me know or post something on the FAQ site. If it's an internship, the work plan needs to include the plan for placement in a similar job and should really yield concrete results in that placement. When it comes to the WIOA 20% requirement, those of you who are not WIOA providers may not know about this, but under WIOA youth funds, like I said, about the 75% that have to be spent on out-of-school youth, 20% of WIOA youth funds must be spent on work-based learning or work experience. We feel like we had a question as to whether or not that would be a requirement for these funds. We did not list it as a specific requirement, except in the fact that WIOA Title I funds, which are the overwhelming majority of the funds that are going into this RFA. They're not exclusively the funds that are going in, but they are the majority. So if your project is funded with the Title I portion of the funds that are going into the RFA, that will be a requirement, but it shouldn't be a big deal at all because the projects that we're describing here have to have work-based learning as a centerpiece. It runs throughout the RFA, and when you read the RFA, you'll see that. So 20% is a pretty low bar for the kind of projects that we've listed as having the potential to be successful. When it comes to credentials, applicants need to articulate the kind of training that they're going to be sending kids through, or youth, I should say. Youth definitely goes up to 24. I wouldn't call those folks kids anymore. but applicants must articulate in their project plans those specific credentials that are earned in training. Credentials should be industry and not just specific to the company, should be industry recognized. The credentials should be stackable and portable. College credit is encouraged, but it's not required. There may be some very industry-specific credentials that are really smart to go after and can stack into the future, into somebody's career. That might be perfectly acceptable to the folks that review the applications, to the criteria, the RFA, and those would be allowable as well, even if they are not college credit tied. Continuous improvement. When you're building your continuous improvement plan, which is a small piece of the project plan that's required, you want to ask yourself a few questions. What are the strategies and data points that are key to improvement? Year over year, cohort over cohort. You want to make sure that that data speaks to your business partner's interests, and you want to make sure that sustainability becomes a foregone conclusion, that anybody would want to sustain these programs based on the model that you're drawing with the data that you're looking at and how you're going to improve the program. Specific questions that dealt with the application. Section 4B is on activities and outcomes. We had a question as to whether or not those activities and outcomes should be specific to what the students are going to complete in the minutia of the curriculum that you're putting them through. That's not what this is for. This isn't individual A completes this module, this module, this module. It's a little bit higher level than that. It's kind of grantee level. So it may be, while it's not, a step-by-step for the participant, it may be something like, X number of program participants begin this curriculum, and then in the outcomes it would be X number of program participants have completed this curriculum, have received this credential, have been placed in this work experience, have been permanently hired as a result of this program. Okay? So it's really on the grantee level that you want to go through your activities and outcomes. When it comes to Section 7A on the budget, we did make a correction. There was some leftover language underneath of the header that we had to replace that basically said that only businesses had to fill out the proposed match. That was from a dislocated worker RFA that we did earlier. For the purposes of this application, you do need to, because there is such a heavy emphasis on leverage and matching funds, you do need to list those in the budget. And that budget, that matching column should reflect the contributions of the applicant and their partners, including business, to each line item of the budget. And then you go over into your budget narrative and you explain what those things are. As far as the Section 8 work plan goes, this was more of a question about what bureaucrats we are and how we do things that are sometimes repetitive. We are kind of forced to do that because we do have the application process, but we also need a technical proposal that's attached as a separate document for review purposes. We do have to have you go ahead and answer the questions that are in Section 8. All of those questions should be addressed in your technical proposal anyway. Your technical proposal may be a little bit more expansive than just the questions you're asking on the application, or the questions that you're answering on the application, excuse me. And so it really should be kind of a cut and paste job for you to answer these questions in Section 8 of the work plan, because your technical proposal that you're developing as something that you're going to attach to the application should answer all these questions anyway. It may line up directly. It may be that when you combine your answers to Section 8, that it is the entirety of your technical proposal. Regardless, it's not duplicate information. It's just the fact that the necessity of our oversight and what we have to do, again, as bureaucrats, which is unfortunate, is sometimes repetitive. But it shouldn't mean extra work for you. When it comes to MOUs, another piece about MOUs. You want to contact your local workforce area and, like I said, address the key sectors. I'm kind of a broken record about this. You want to address their planning priorities and the regional plans, and address the feasibility to sustain the to sustain a program that is successful. For Cook County projects specifically, they asked us to post a web link that is that will be an easier way for you to make a request for a partnership agreement with the local workforce area, and that link is there. So you can describe to them what you're doing, what RFA you're applying for, and get a quicker response that way. When it comes to fiscal FAQ, we did address, I've got kind of a not really truncated version, just kind of a bulleted out version of well, I guess it's truncated, kind of a bulleted out version of the questions that we answered in the fiscal FAQ. All of these questions that we got and the answers that are in the full wording of the answers is online in the FAQ section at the Youth 2016 website. But we wanted to just kind of walk through these real quick and let you know, kind of a bulleted out, and give you an opportunity to ask more questions about these pieces. But we did also post longer answers to these online. Sheila, do you want to kind of jump in here?
Oh, I suppose. This is like all new to me here. So some of this, because I didn't write these, so it's like, oh, okay, what am I talking about? Okay, let's see if I can find something on this.
Well, I can jump in because I bulleted, I kind of shortened some of the question answers. So we got a question about matching and leveraging, and if there was a percentage requirement, if folks were required to match or leverage a certain percentage of their budget amount. We did not lay out a minimum requirement. That doesn't mean that you should come with $1 from a business and expect to get funded. We are going to evaluate on the strengths of your partnership. The strengths of your partnership are partially evidenced by the amount of funding and leverage match that you're able to come up with from business partners and any other partners that you include in your plan. Leveraged funds can include in-kind or cash contributions, but again, when it comes to in-kind, they need to be necessary, reasonable, and allocable. They need to be based and they need to be tied directly to activities that are contained in your project scope. And for leveraged funds that are either cash or in-kind, they do have to be verifiable in recipient records. That speaks to our oversight and our responsibilities to the feds who give us this money to fund these projects. Going through definitions, we've got very specific definitions of leveraged and matching funds that are up in the FAQ site. So I encourage you to take a look there, but I'll walk through these real quick. Leveraged funds are resources used by the grantee to support grant activity and outcomes, whether those resources meet the standards applied to a match or not. And again, that means both allowable match and other costs that don't rise to the requirements of the regulation, but that support the outcomes of the grants. Matching funds, and Sheila already spoke to this once, but we'll reiterate. Additional non-federal funds expended to support grant objectives got to be spent on allowable grant activities. They got to be verifiable in your recipient records. They cannot be used to support another federally funded program. They do need to be necessary, reasonable, and allowable under cost principles, provided for in the approved budget and under and allowable under the grant, and conform to the other applicable uniform guidance. So this is where it kind of gets into all the fiscal regulation. Is there anything that you feel we need to expand on there, Sheila, or do you feel like folks will be able to figure this one out?
They should. I mean, and a lot of it, there's other, if they read the uniform guidance, you know, there's some information in there too if they want to research in there. You know, there's always information available in there.
Sure.
That's the guidelines that we're going by. It's the 2 CFR 200. I don't know if you want to post that on the
That is exactly what I was
site.
about to ask. If you would, if we could post a link to that guidance, if you would throw that into the chat box, if you could, and then we'll post it on the site as well.
Okay. Do you want me to just provide you the document, or?
We could do it either way if you want to link to it online, or we could just put the document on the website as well.
Okay, because I think I have the document somewhere.
That's perfect. So, folks, we will post that on the Youth 2016 website, so if you want to dive deeper into that, you can. Again, a lot of this, you know, if you've got the matching and leveraged funds, if you have matching and leveraged funds in your project, you know, making sure that those things conform to the CFR is something that you know, we can address and talk about, you know, down the road. It is something that you'll have to do for monitoring purposes. But again, I don't want it to intimidate you out of applying for a grant. Non-federal cash expenditures and non-federal in-kind expenditures are also just kind of as an FYI defined here, and you can keep these slides and download these slides down in the corner so you can use these for reference. Make sure that costs are allowable. A couple of questions that we got were around paying indirect costs and profit. This grant will not pay profit, but it will pay indirect costs. We had a specific question asking if there would be startup funds available at the beginning of a project. We want to reiterate that funding for the program is provided on a reimbursement basis. That's how our grants work. However, we will, you know, we're going to work with you to provide prompt payment, and if upfront costs are absolutely necessary, you need to make that clear to us. Per the uniform guidance, the timing and amount of any advance payments would have to be as close as administratively feasible to the actual cash disbursements that you would get on a reimbursement basis. Generally, any kind of operating advance cannot exceed, I believe it's 20% of the total grant. There is a possibility that we can work with you on advance funds. Again, that's subject to our pre-award survey, which kind of measures your capacity. It's also subject to our regulations as well. So if you do need an advance on the grant to be able to implement the grant, it's just something that you need to make clear to us up front. I'm not able to flip here, Chelsea.
That's the last slide.
Oh, that's the last slide. Okay.
Yeah.
We already made it to the end. All right. So sometimes I get into a zone, and I just, you know, I think that we've got more to say. But I'm sure that you folks have probably heard my voice enough. Again, I'm going to flip back, though, and make sure that you're aware of my contact information so that you know who you're talking to, so that you know that you can reach out to me at any point in time if you've got additional questions. As we get additional questions, if you want to submit more to us today, I'm going to try and include all of those in tomorrow's webinar and Thursday's webinar. We wanted to make sure that we can fit as many informational sessions in as possible so that folks feel confident in applying for grants. I think Chelsea has another question, another poll question we wanted to ask at the end here, just if you wouldn't mind humoring us and letting us know whether you do intend to apply, if you're likely to apply, or if you're interested in partnering with other grantees. It would be really good to be able to kind of carry forward the information as we go forward. It helps us to prepare for how many applications we're going to see. We do thank you for your time. We've got a little bit more time. If you've got additional questions for me, you can go ahead and fire away. Chelsea, I mean, if you want to unmute everybody, we could even, take verbal questions.
Your microphone has been turned on.
Everyone is now unmuted if you'd like to ask any questions to Matt or Sheila regarding RFA.
Or if you just got anything that you want to talk about, anything that's on your chest you want to talk about, we can talk about anything. All right. Well, again, if you need more information, I see a couple of folks need more information. Feel free to reach out to me via email. We can set up some time to talk. You know, I'm more than willing to spend any time that's necessary. Obviously, as you can imagine, our schedules are pretty tight with trying to get these projects off the ground and trying to get this RFA, you know, trying to get this RFA process going. However, I'm more than willing to make time as soon as is possible, even if that's, you know, outside of office hours. So just let me know what you need to know and whether or not I can be of service. Thanks a lot for your time today, folks. Thank you to Sheila for jumping in and covering
Oh, you're
Fiscal.
welcome.